This is Marketing Mixtape, where people like you become better marketers. And now, this is your host, the Professor, Scott Davis.
Do you want to show your ideas through awesome visuals? What is the value of design in B2B marketing? This episode's guest is CEO and founder of Stick.ai, a platform to help you illustrate your thoughts automatically. That's cool, right? Welcome, our guest, Ali McKee. Ali, thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I know that you're going to bring a different perspective than any guest I've had on thus far. So I'm super jazzed that you're here. So first, I just want to say thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled.
And this is really cool because I am an aspiring creative with no creative bone in my body. So I'm really excited to talk to people like you. I teach a class called Integrated Marketing Programs and the Salesforce, which is a really heavy B2B class. We do CRM tools and we talk about B2B sales and marketing a lot. But if there's one gap that I had to put my finger on in that class, it's talking about design, talking about the creative process, talking about content marketing. So I think that you're kind of a key guest for me in teaching this class. And I'm hoping that since you have a really cool design background, that you can kind of briefly take us through this journey of how you went from being an artist to now working in a B2B space.
Absolutely. So my theory is that you're wrong, that you do have a creative bone in your body, and that everyone does. And it's more about how do you unlock it rather than, teaching it through some design program. I think that one of the magical things about visual language, visual communication, and design is that it's instinctual, right? And the example I always give is, when you're a business person hiring a designer, and I've been on both sides of that, right? When you're a business person hiring a designer, you say like, oh, I can't do this. I need to hire someone. The second you get that first draft, you always have feedback, right? I mean, every single time there's never a first draft that's a final draft. I've never heard of it, ever. And so that's where I would say, my perspective has always been, I was a studio art major undergrad, and have worked as a designer a little bit at idea.org and then business as a consultant, and have bopped around either side. And I can see that I think people don't give themselves enough credit because it is intimidating, the design world and the art world. So my big passion is how do you unlock that and bring it to everyone?
Yeah, and your background's so cool. So you're a trained artist and you worked at IDEO, right? You just threw that in there, but that's a big deal to me. And I think you earned your MBA at Stanford, right? Which is kind of interlinked with IDEO in many ways. So that's really cool. And it kind of starts to bear out how you have this design background, but made your way into B2B sales and marketing. I still have a lot of questions about, and I don't mean to act like I'm presuming it's not important to have good design, but I always think about, the functional benefits, the economic benefits, things like that when we talk about software as a service. And now you come in with brand elements and design elements. So what is the importance of design?
So here's the misconception is that good design is beautiful. I don't believe that. I think that good design is clear communication. Design is just art for a purpose. And when you think about a sales and marketing background, there's a difference between a gorgeous brand and a really clear, crisp, narrative, visuals to go with it, et cetera. And again, I think something that's well designed could be scrawled on a piece of paper with a Sharpie. It's not about the beauty of it. It's about, does it get the point across? Does it fit the purpose? And I think that has been another piece that's actually quite fun in the B2B space. Again, coming out of sort of the polished design world, the bar is so low because there are a lot of, the tools available are very clunky and it's hard to get your ideas out. And that's the goal. It's not about, your typography. Brand is important. Brand is definitely important, but it's not about the polish. It's about like, what's the meat and can you iterate quickly?
Right. So, and you've developed a software product called Stick to help with this. And I have some questions about when we would use this in the sales funnel, because in teaching some other classes in personal selling, for example, we really build up to the sales presentation. So is Stick, can you describe what Stick is? And is it just something to help you? Is it a PowerPoint alternative, something to help you with the sales presentation? Or is it something different than that?
Sure. Good question. So when I'll give you a little bit of background and kind of the story behind it. So the theme, if you look at the career path, not even career path, my life path, the constant theme has always been visual communication. How do you help people understand each other through stories and through visuals to tell those stories? And Stick was born out of this passion for this field after having done it myself so many times, right? And seeing, okay, I've got a process that I'm doing, people are paying me to do, I know how to do it. What if we could take that process and put it into a program so that anyone could do it? So even the people saying, oh, I'm not creative, giving them that power as well. And even better, learning from all of these people to get way smarter as a tool than any one designer could be, right? And so that was kind of the theme that has always been the theme of Stick, or the vision of Stick. And when I started it, I said, okay, where do people need visuals in business? I said, all right, obviously sales and marketing is a great place, high repetition, lots of data. That's a great place to start. And I went into it about a year ago saying, this is all about sales presentations. It's like, we'll be a PowerPoint alternative. But as I just have gone headfirst into this field and have seen, I think that the presentations are dying. And I think it's happening. I initially thought it was, maybe 10 years. Now I'm like, oh, maybe 5 years. And now I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe by the end of the year. But what's happening is there's this shift. So with longer term, higher value contracts, it used to be, okay, I'm here, I'm a field sales rep, I'm going to perform my pitch deck, right? And you're going to sign on the dotted line, $3 million in the bank, we're good. No more. That's done. That's not the norm anymore. What's happening now is the shift towards, you're not only, those 3-year contracts are now, 1-year contracts, 3-month contracts, instantaneous, like usage-based contracts, right? So if you can't deliver value to your customer, your revenue stops. You're not set, it's continuous. And so it went from being this, funnel to literally a cycle. And with that cycle is just this constant stream of content. It's case studies, it's demos, it's discovery calls, it's, when you get into the success cycle, it's quarterly business reviews, it's upsell, new demos for new use cases. And it's this constant thing such that I don't think that there's the beautifully designed PDF from marketing. Last phase. I think it's phasing out.
So is that good for Stick or bad for Stick? I would think that now there's more demand for visuals through this cycle, as you described it. So there are more opportunities to use the software than just, because if you're just relying on one pitch deck and everything's very transactional, you just need to update that like once a year or at the most once every 6 months. But what you're describing is, I'm going to be posting things every week on LinkedIn, or maybe I'm going to be posting something that's very personalized for this client. So this is good for you?
Yeah, so in the next podcast, I'll get some marketing and sales advice for my business, because I know I could learn from you on this too. But the broader vision, right, is again to enable anyone to really translate their ideas into visuals. And this is not just because they're pretty. Again, this is because visuals are more engaging. They actually grab attention and they, stick in your memory, and you can see. Social media, right? That's the way the world is going. It's like faster, shorter form, more visual, more engaging. And my passion is not about like fighting PowerPoint. It's Microsoft is a great company. It's really about how do you enable people to speak this new language across channels. So yeah, I mean, for us, it's fantastic because there's so many new applications. Like you have a LinkedIn status, great, add an image to it. It's more likely to get reshared. You have a blog post, great. It's more likely to get read if and if there's an image every 75 to 100 words. And we also know that stock photography doesn't work anymore with this generation because we have a BS meter, quite frankly, that it doesn't work. So you need to come up with new ways of communicating visually. But anywhere from that kind of top of funnel stuff all the way through discovery, call follow-ups, customer success presentations, QBR, value readouts, like all of these things. It's just this constant stream. We want it to be like, the filter. It's like a Grammarly almost. Grammarly takes your normal text and makes sure that it's better by improving it. It's the same thing. Like that's the end goal.
Okay, so I'm thinking about the ways that I share things on LinkedIn and Twitter, for example. So if I have, I'm not really doing a lot of B2B, but if I have 4 bullet points and I put those into the Stick software, what do I get out? Is it a slide? Is it an image, or is it whatever I want it to be?
Yeah, it's an image that you can then, if you want to make it part of a longer stream, a story or presentation format, that works too, or you can just do a single image. But it's something like, if there are, let's say you are describing 4 steps, you put in your 4 bullet points. We're using language processing to understand the key ideas, using machine learning to recommend the appropriate visual layouts, and we're populating a flowchart because it's a process. And let's say that, you get the first draft and you say, this isn't as much, this is more like a timeline because I want to say that this is, rooted in concrete. Great. Double click it, swap it into a timeline. Or let's say you say, no, it's none of those things. It's actually like a Venn diagram. Great. Double click it, swap it out. And it takes 30 seconds when really that manual design work would have taken anyone, even skilled designers, it would have taken them 2 hours. So we're trying to just speed up the process and give anyone that creative inventory, like right there in the app, so that you're not moving boxes around, because that's not our job, right? Our job is to sell, not to do graphic design.
So you might not like me asking this, but I have to because I'm thinking about this as we talk about it. But can you sell this to Microsoft? I'm just thinking if I put 3 bullet points in a PowerPoint slide and it tells me like this is what I should use, and it's actually intelligent in what it's recommending, I think that would be super valuable.
Yes, and it's a good strategy that I've heard before for sure. So that, again, this is probably for your strategy class, but I have kind of learned from looking at lots of different companies, business schools, a consultant, et cetera, right? The DNA of a company is really, really important. And Microsoft's DNA is text. It's based in text. That was, word processing was kind of what exploded the Office suite. If you look at, PowerPoint was actually invented the year that I was born to, basically take those documents and be able to share them. But it was always text. So I think it's really hard it would be hard for a product like this to go into an organization like that, because that's when you end up becoming like a feature rather than a true, not only like a product creator, but like a category creator. Like the vision is to be a new language for business and education. And I don't think that Microsoft shares the same passion, which is great. They should do their thing and I'll do mine.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Or you could look at selling the Prezi or someone else. No,
also,
I think
also a great company.
I think what you're doing is incredible, and it's really appealing to someone like me because I mentioned maybe it was overblown, but I'm not that creative. So if I'm in PowerPoint and I know the key points that I want to make, what I often end up with is a slide that's filled with text, and then if I go into a presentation, people are reading my slide and barely even noticing that I'm in the room. So just knowing that there are tools out there that can help me with that is so valuable, and I think just knowing the type of people that are in this space in B2B sales and marketing, I imagine they're eating this up.
So that's a great point, and one I'd like to double underline, right? Again, to the point of design is not about beauty in this situation. Design is about how do you facilitate a conversation? The purpose is to connect as a buyer and a seller, as two people trying to solve a problem. You are going to build that connection if you can have a conversation, if you have guidance for that conversation, and if you have some kind of summary of that conversation, right? The more content you put on those slides, the less your conversation partner is relying on you for information. Right?
That's right.
The point is to be as minimal and as simple as possible. And here's the other thing about visuals. It's just like such a good neuro hack, right? Most of us are visual learners. And so it does not take much. It's like a spark. You have that almost token that like it jogs your memory and you remember your point. Whereas if you have, speed or something on there, you're like, oh, what was I supposed to say about speed again? But if you have kind of an icon that captures exactly what your point was around speed, then you can jump into it so quickly. And it's spatial as well, right? It's not like, okay, prospect, I'm going to make points 1, 2, 3, and 4. No one wants to sit through that. Instead, it's, hey, prospect, look, we're going to talk about 3 topics. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. And the other thing is that, so when I'm teaching a course like personal selling, sometimes we'll say, because we've moved beyond this transactional model of sales, and now it's much more, especially in B2B, about consultative selling. And one way to measure the success of your presentation is in how much time you're talking. And the more that you're talking, typically the worse it's going. And I think that visuals could be a really nice aid for that. And not only that, I think that visuals also will cue the viewer to ask questions, where a block of text cues them to read and process.
And if you think about it as just building empathy, right? And saying, okay, how do I feel when I'm sitting in presentations? And when you see visuals, you are able to imagine, ask questions, build on ideas. Whereas when you see a block of text, you're like intimidated, like you've got to read it really quickly, or you should know that information, right? Because it's so concrete and it's so in your face. And I think that's what you're really trying to do as a seller, is you're trying to make your buyer feel good. You're trying to help them, and you're not trying to intimidate them, and you're certainly not trying to bore them. And yet we do it again and again. And then you couple that with the fact that our brains are literally changing to be, faster, more visual, like just primed by social media to have that instant gratification. And, over half of buyers are millennials now. Like, this isn't, the next wave. Like, this is today. Like, this is the reality today. So, I think you couple all these factors, and it's just, you can tell I get so excited because there are big, big changes happening right now.
Another thing that you see happening a lot more today, especially with millennial buyers or people who, really anybody, because everyone now has the mobile device on them, is people will take pictures of your slides. So if they take a picture of your slide and it's 6 paragraphs of text versus 3 arrows with 3 words in it, I think that one of those is obviously better than the other. And the other thing is that if someone's just taking notes, they can kind of jot down your diagram and then spin that off into a conversation later when they're making the purchase decision or something like that. So I can certainly see a lot of benefits there. How are you actually seeing clients use Stick today? Is it still mostly for PowerPoint stuff, or do you see it a lot on social media, or are people putting images on their websites or in their PDFs? What are you observing?
Yep. So this is a hard problem because people are literally primed with 30 years of behavior with slide tools, right? And you can say there are other slide tools, but the reality is like PowerPoint set the foundation. Even Keynote feels a lot like PowerPoint. It's Google Slides certainly does. And so, people are so deeply primed into, okay, here are my slides, here's my deck, here's my presentation. And so on one hand, I think there's a huge demand for change from the buyer's side. However, like anything, this is a really big shift for sellers. This is a really big change in the way that we're doing our jobs. And so, anyway, long story short, we're testing out a lot of things. The product is finding a home in kind of a slide and presentation land to start, but I think we're really trying to actively iterating on the product design daily, weekly to see, how we can fit into other parts of the workflow as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's good that you're kind of prepared for both sides. So if PowerPoint stays around, you're already in that space. But if it evolves past that, then they're images, right? And you can use images anywhere. So I think that's also really cool. So since I come from a consumer behavior background, I also want to ask you, do you conduct any consumer research? And it seems like it might be more complicated for you because you have to understand the person giving the pitch or, sending out the social media message, whatever they're doing, and you have to understand the recipient. So do you have a process for that or a strategy?
It's constant, absolutely constant. I think one of the things that is really important too is to balance the individual with the trends, right? So I see, in terms of individuals, it's like going to customers' offices, sitting with them, working out of their office, like even in between meetings, right? And just kind of absorbing, really getting into the psyche of like the few buyer personas that you want to focus on. Understanding like what motivates them and, what else do they care about in their life? So it's just asking a million questions, right? Like basically why as many times as you can without sounding like an interrogation officer and getting creative about those, of course, as well. But then on the other hand, it's like really making sure that you are thinking about the broader trends. So for me, I've spent a lot of time going to events, even just observing, a handful of sales communities, email chains, right? Like LinkedIn, my LinkedIn feed is huge in terms of understanding what people are talking about, time at conferences, like all of these things it's tough because particularly as a small startup, right? My number one goal right now is like build product and get that research. And so going to a conference seems like, oh my gosh, this is 2 days out of the office that like I should be, optimizing our button design and like looking at user data and figuring out how to, improve drop-off rates, whatever. But the reality is like when you're trying to do something really big, which we are, you have to have a sense of where the world is going too. And I think conferences are a great way to gauge what are the big ideas being shared and what is the broader trend of the market.
That's really cool. Yeah, you should come here to Houston because there's a lot of healthcare B2B going on and a lot of oil industry B2B happening here. But it's really exciting. And I think that kind of where you are in the process of being a startup in a really interesting B2B sales and marketing space is really cool. And it's going to be really cool for my students to get this exposure. I will have a lot of listeners who are not my students. And I imagine a lot of them are going to want to try Stick. So I know the website stick.ai. Do you have demos or other ways to follow you?
Yeah, so what we've been doing is, we have kind of amassed a wait list over the past few months, and we're doing demos with kind of companies. Again, it's like really consumer behavior research more than demos at this stage. But we have, a handful of companies in kind of pilots right now and are slowly ramping that up. So I would love to get people using it and continue to learn. And we're excited to change the way that we're talking to our customers.
That's really cool. One last thought I have is that I also study clue management, and I was thinking about what I mentioned earlier, where you have I think about the functional benefits and the economic, savings and things like that when you talk about B2B sales and marketing. But if you think about the way a client is actually going to perceive you, their first exposure to you might be that bulleted list or this really cool visual. So it kind of sends them a signal that, hey, this is a kind of a first-rate company versus a company who's kind of doing everything the old-fashioned way. So I think just from a consumer psychology standpoint, what you're doing can be so powerful for huge companies, which is good for you because they have a lot of money. Right? So I'm really excited. And also we talked about Stick, but how can people follow you?
Yeah, so I write daily on LinkedIn and roughly weekly on Medium. So just find me, Allie McKee, on LinkedIn and follow. And it's been one of my favorite parts of this journey, honestly, is trying to share snippets on sales, marketing, and also sort of the startup. Some days it's peaks, some days it's valleys, and just getting a lot of strength and inspiration, and hopefully sharing some learning so people can avoid some of my mistakes along the way.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Allie. I really appreciate your time, and I got a lot out of this interview, and I know that the listeners are going to as well.
Thank you so much. It's great to be on.
If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe, rate and review Marketing Mixtape on iTunes, and visit scottwdavis.com for more information.